The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Not a single seat was left unclaimed, and even the walls seemed to pulse with anticipation. Every camera lens was aimed forward, focused on the two men who hadn't yet entered. Reporters whispered in rapid bursts, live feeds buzzed across the globe, and millions of people sat glued to their screens, waiting for the unimaginable, a legal showdown between Tom Cruise and Denzel Washington. What no one expected was how deep the story would go. Beneath the glamour, behind the sharp suits and measured legal jargon, something ancient was brewing, a storm that had waited decades to arrive. And now it was here. The judge's gavel hadn't yet struck the bench when the heavy wooden doors creaked open. Tom Cruise walked in first. Not as a hero this time, not as a spy or a jet pilot. Just a man, still composed, still with that Hollywood gleam, but visibly tense. He wore a navy blue suit tailored within an inch of perfection. Yet there was a tightness to his jaw. His eyes scanned the room, locking briefly with the cameras, then with a few familiar executives in the gallery, men who once celebrated him, now silent. Behind him, Denzel Washington entered without fanfare, no entourage, no nod to the cameras, just quiet strength. He wore a simple charcoal gray suit, no tie, and a calm expression that didn't need performance. Where Tom's silence was guarded, Denzel's was grounded. One looked like he was hiding something. The other looked like he was preparing to reveal it. The judge entered. Everyone stood. And just like that, the silence cracked. Court is now in session. This wasn't a typical celebrity lawsuit. This was a war over truth, legacy, and the unspoken power structures of Hollywood. Cruise had been accused, not by fans, not by tabloids, but by a co-star, a young actress named Elena Ward, of contract sabotage and psychological coercion. And in a stunning twist, Denzel had chosen not to remain neutral. He volunteered to testify, not for the defense, for the prosecution, and that changed everything. The media called it betrayal. The public called it brave. But behind closed doors, industry giants whispered something more dangerous. He knows. Day one was all about setting the stage. Tom's team, led by celebrity attorney Max Hendricks, tried to paint the whole case as character assassination. Mr. Cruise, he said, addressing the courtroom, has given everything to this industry. He has worked through broken bones, dangerous stunts, and personal tragedy, all to entertain, to inspire. And now, because of misunderstandings and distorted motives, we're expected to believe he's a villain? He paused for dramatic effect. The man who made Top Gun soar? The man who carried the Mission Impossible legacy for 2 decades? The same man now accused of tearing down someone else's dream? No, this is not justice. This is vengeance wrapped in hearsay. The audience stirred. Some nodded. Some frowned. But no one spoke. When it was the prosecution's turn, their tone was colder, more surgical. They didn't attack Tom's fame. They didn't insult his legacy. Instead, they exposed the patterns, quiet settlements, non-disclosure agreements, staff turnover. And then, finally, they said the words that shifted the air. Our key witness, the prosecutor said slowly, has spent 40 years in this industry. He knows how systems work. He knows how silence spreads. And he was there when it happened. The courtroom rustled again. All eyes turned toward Denzel, but he did not flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, folded his hands, and waited. Flashbacks gripped the minds of many in the room. The red carpets, the award shows, the photo ops where Cruise and Washington had stood shoulder to shoulder, smiling like brothers in arms. Hollywood loved stories about friendship, but it loved stories about betrayal even more. Mr. Washington, the prosecutor continued, will testify that what happened to Elena Ward was not isolated. He will explain how silence is currency in this business, how fear is weaponized, and how legacy can be manipulated to hide the truth. That was when the first murmur of panic spread across Tom's defense table. Outside the courtroom, protests had begun. Some fans of Cruz waved banners that read "innocent until proven guilty." Others, mostly young industry hopefuls, held signs that said, "We believe her." But inside, it was a different battlefield. During recess, cameras captured a rare moment. Tom Cruise, standing alone by the courtroom window, eyes locked on something beyond the glass. Maybe it was his reflection. Maybe it was his past. But he looked older in that moment. Not because of years, but because of weight. The kind of weight that no amount of box office power can lift. Denzel, meanwhile, sat quietly at the witness bench, flipping through a small leather notebook. No one knew what was inside. Some guessed notes. Others suspected names. But the truth was simpler and heavier: memories. That evening, media networks couldn't get enough. One anchor said, "If Denzel delivers what's been rumored, we may be looking at a legal earthquake." But back in his hotel room, Denzel didn't watch the coverage. He sat by the window, reading a letter. It was from Elena Ward, handwritten, shaky pen marks. No fancy stationery. Just raw emotion. "Thank you for standing up," she wrote, even when no one else would. He folded the letter gently and closed his eyes, because he knew what was coming next wouldn't just shake Hollywood. It would shatter it. And tomorrow, he would begin. The courtroom was no longer just a room. It was a crucible, packed tighter than the day before, with extra security lining the walls and a fresh fleet of media trucks clogging every inch of the courthouse perimeter. The world wasn't just watching anymore. It was holding its breath. Inside, the moment had arrived. Denzel Washington stood at the witness stand, raising his hands slowly. His movements were deliberate, as if he was aware of how each gesture echoed across a global stage. The judge nodded. Double quotes. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Denzel's voice was calm. "I do." And then it happened. "Your Honor," Tom Cruise's attorney shot up from his seat, "we request a delay in this testimony. We've obtained evidence, digital records, emails, and voice memos, which directly call into question the credibility of Mr. Washington's statements. This material was submitted to the court less than an hour ago." The room gasped. The judge squinted, displeased. "Mr. Hendricks, you had ample time for discovery. We didn't withhold anything, Your Honor. This data came from a confidential informant. We received it at dawn." A ripple moved through the gallery. Some leaned forward, others whispered nervously. But Denzel remained still, his eyes focused. Straight ahead, unreadable. The judge reviewed the file in silence. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, he looked up. "The court will allow the documents to be reviewed during recess. Mr. Washington will still testify today. Proceed." The tension snapped like a rubber band. The prosecutor rose and walked toward Denzel with slow, purposeful steps. No theatrics, no flashy words. "Just gravity. Double quotes. Mr. Washington," she began. "Can you tell the court why you chose to testify in this case, and what exactly you witnessed?" The room stilled. Denzel leaned into the microphone, his voice low and steady. "I'm here because silence, especially in places of power, is deadly. And because I was in the room." A murmur swept through the back row. "Which room?" the prosecutor asked. "The executive lounge at Paramount Studios. October 13th. It was supposed to be a celebratory meeting after Elena Ward wrapped her final scene in a new film. She was invited by Cruise himself. She was thrilled." "And what happened next?" Denzel's face darkened, not with anger, but memory. "I was there early. I heard a closed-door conversation between Tom and 2 producers. They didn't know I was on the other side. Tom was talking about Elena, not about her talent, not about her future, about how she needed to be put in her place. He said she was getting too bold, too visible. And then he laughed. Not just a casual laugh, a controlling one. And the producers? They agreed. One of them joked, "We'll bury her in red tape," another said. "She won't work in this town for 5 years if we handle it right." Somewhere in the back, a reporter dropped a pen. "Did you confront him?" The prosecutor asked. Denzel shook his head. "Not that night. I wasn't ready. I thought I could stop it from the inside." But 3 weeks later, Elena was dropped from 3 other projects. And nobody would say why. Why speak now? Because silence made me part of the problem. Gasps rang out. Even Tom looked down at the table. But his attorney, Hendricks, leaned in to whisper something. Tom nodded slowly, and for the first time since the trial began, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It was strategic. Hendricks stood. "Mr. Washington," he said, voice loaded with smug confidence. "You've always been a man of integrity, haven't you? I try to be. And you've prided yourself on being neutral, avoiding drama. Neutrality is easy when you're not the one being hurt. So why now, after all these years? Surely you've seen worse in Hollywood?" "I have," Denzel replied. "But this time, it was personal and public." "Let's talk about personal," Hendricks said, pacing. "You once worked with Elena Ward's brother, didn't you? On a short film?" "Yes. 3 years ago, so you had a personal connection." "I barely knew him. But you donated to his GoFund when he had cancer. Isn't that true?" "It is." Hendricks turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are not here because of justice. We are here because of sentiment." "Objection." The prosecutor snapped, sustained. Hendricks smiled again, unfazed. "Mr. Washington," he continued, "are you aware of the emails retrieved this morning from your private account, showing coordination with Miss Ward before this trial?" The prosecutor stood instantly. "Objection. Those emails were illegally obtained." "Your Honor," Hendricks said, holding up a document, "we have authentication. And we have one more surprise." He turned toward the judge, then toward the door. "We call to the stand actor Matt Devlin." The room imploded. Matt Devlin, Tom Cruise's former co-star, longtime ally of both Cruise and Washington, had been quiet for years. He was the one name that had never been pulled into any scandal, until now. The doors opened slowly. Matt walked in, looking tired, thinner than usual, and deeply conflicted. As he approached the stand, he didn't even glance at Denzel, and that was all Denzel needed to know. Something was wrong. Matt was sworn in. "Mr. Devlin," Hendricks said, "you were present during the October 13th meeting, were you not?" Matt hesitated. The room was on edge. "Yes. And did you hear Mr. Cruise say what Mr. Washington claims?" A pause. Then Matt said quietly, "No, I didn't hear any of that." The courtroom froze. Denzel looked at Matt, eyes searching for any hint of truth or fear. "I was there the whole time," Matt continued. "There were conversations about schedules, finances, but nothing like what Denzel just said." The blow landed. The media outside erupted with headlines. "Surprise witness contradicts Denzel's testimony." Was the courtroom star witness just exposed? Back inside, Denzel stayed composed. But deep inside, something broke, not because he was doubted, but because Matt, someone he trusted, had just handed Hollywood another mask to hide behind. Recess was called. People filed out slowly, buzzing with speculation. In the hallway, Denzel stepped aside, pulled out his phone, and played a voice memo. It was Elena Ward's voice, shaking and afraid. "They told me to keep quiet or they'd ruin me. They said Tom had the power to end my career before it even started. I wish someone would just tell the truth." He stared at the screen, then at the closed courtroom doors. And he knew tomorrow he wouldn't just testify, he would expose everything. The next morning, a strange tension gripped the courthouse. It wasn't the usual buzz of anticipation. It was colder, heavier. The crowd lining the steps outside had doubled. Inside, the security presence had tripled. Metal detectors, extra guards, even plainclothes agents with earpieces. Something was off, and Denzel Washington felt it the moment he stepped out of the elevator. Cameras flashed. Microphones swarmed. Questions were hurled like darts. Was Matt Devlin lying? Do you still stand by your testimony? Are you afraid this will ruin your career? Denzel didn't respond. Not yet. His words, he knew, had to count. Inside the courtroom, Tom Cruise sat flanked by his legal team. His face was stoic, unreadable, but beneath the calm was something harder: calculation. Last night's headlines had been in his favor. The damage to Denzel's credibility had already begun. And Cruise's attorneys had one goal now: bury the momentum, discredit the witness, and shift public perception. But Denzel had come with something they didn't expect, something they thought was lost. When the judge entered and called the court to order, the prosecutor stood immediately. "Your Honor," she said, her voice sharp and composed, "before we resume witness testimony, the prosecution would like to enter new material into evidence." A digital file, recovered from a cloud archive and verified by metadata. What file? Hendricks interrupted, eyes narrowing. An audio recording, made unknowingly by the victim, Elena Ward. The room held its breath. It contains a conversation between Mr. Cruise and two unnamed studio executives, the very meeting Mr. Washington described in his testimony yesterday. The judge leaned forward. "Is this verified?" "Yes, Your Honor." Date stamped, location matched, and authenticated through forensic audio analysis. A beat of silence. "Play the file," the judge said. A courtroom technician plugged in the speaker system. Moments later, the scratchy, quiet recording began to play. At first, only ambient noise. Glasses clinking. Muffled voices. Then, "She's starting to think she matters." A male voice, unmistakably Tom Cruise's. "Yeah, she's not understanding how this town works," said another. "We'll bury her in contracts. She won't know which way is up. Give it 6 weeks, she vanish." Then laughter. Cold, casual, deliberate. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Tom's jaw clenched. Hendricks froze. Some jurors looked physically sick, and Denzel? He didn't blink. After a long pause, the prosecutor looked at the judge. "Your Honor, we request to resume Mr. Washington's testimony in light of this recording." "Granted," the judge replied, voice low and shaken. Denzel took the stand again. This time, he didn't hesitate. "What you just heard," he began, "is why I'm here. Not because I'm angry. Not because I have a personal vendetta. But because we've built a system that rewards silence and punishes truth. Because if someone like Elena Ward can be silenced by men this powerful, what hope does anyone else have?" He paused, scanning the courtroom. "I've been in this industry 40 years. I've seen how power works, how it bends truth, how it dresses up cruelty in charm and charisma. Tom Cruise is talented. No one's denying that. But talent doesn't excuse control. Fame doesn't erase consequence." The defense team squirmed. Hendricks whispered furiously to his assistant. Cruise avoided eye contact, staring instead at the empty witness seat across the room. "And Matt Devlin?" the prosecutor asked. "Was he lying yesterday?" Denzel looked down. "He was protecting himself. Maybe his family. I can't speak to his fear. But I know the truth. And now so does everyone else." The judge called a short recess. The courtroom erupted as reporters sprinted for exits. Broadcasting updates live. Audio confirms Cruise's involvement in intimidation scheme. Washington's testimony gains historic weight after leaked file. Hollywood's silence cracked wide open. But the damage wasn't just legal now. It was cultural. Outside, something unexpected was happening. Young actors, crew members, assistants, people who had never spoken before, were gathering. Not just to protest, to testify. Some held signs, "We're next if he walks free." Others shouted chants, "Protect truth, not fame." And from a distance, Denzel watched it all. He turned to the prosecutor and said quietly, "It's not about winning anymore. It's about breaking the cycle." She nodded. "We're almost there." Back inside, Tom's team was unraveling. Hendricks demanded a delay in proceedings, citing trial by media and reputational damage. But the judge denied it. The damage, he said, was not done by the court. It was done by the actions revealed in that audio. By late afternoon, Emma T.T. Devlin returned to the courthouse. Unannounced. He didn't ask to testify. He just asked to speak to Denzel. They met in a private chamber. Matt, single quotes, S voice was hoarse. "They threatened my sister, said she'd lose her job. Said the press would dig up her past. I didn't know what else to do." "You could have told the truth," Denzel replied, quiet but firm. Matt looked down. "I'm ready now." The next day, he would testify again, this time unfiltered. But for tonight, Denzel walked alone back to his hotel. As he reached the door, his phone buzzed. One message. No name. "Just a number. You made a mistake. Walk away, or we'll make sure you do." He stared at it for a long time, then deleted it, because he had already made up his mind, and tomorrow, the whole industry would change. When the sun rose over Los Angeles that morning, it didn't feel like a normal day. It felt like something sacred had been broken overnight, not just in Hollywood, but in every system built on silence and polished power. News choppers hovered over the charred remains of a downtown law office. Thick black smoke curled into the sky like a warning or a cover-up. Police tape fluttered in the wind while investigators combed through ashes with gloved hands. And yet, for all the destruction, the world already knew the fire wasn't random. Because it hadn't taken lives. It had targeted truth. Inside courtroom 6B, everything had changed. No more polite smiles. No more shallow pleasantries. This was war now, quiet, careful, and televised. Denzel Washington arrived early. No security. No sunglasses. Just the same coat he wore every day of the trial. In the inner pocket, zipped tight against his chest, was the USB drive. The only surviving copy of the evidence, emails, call logs, internal memos, all proving how Elena Ward's career had been dismantled behind closed doors. Not by accident, not by poor luck. By design. He took his seat in the courtroom as the judge entered. Every juror seemed a little straighter in their posture today. Every camera lens zoomed in tighter. Even Tom Cruise, usually the master of poise, looked like a man carrying an invisible weight. The judge addressed the room. "This court has been made aware of a targeted attack on evidence tied directly to this case. While we investigate the criminal matter separately, we will proceed with the trial." Hendricks stood up immediately. "Your Honor, if I may, this atmosphere is becoming dangerous. My client's safety." "Sit down, Mr. Hendricks," the judge cut in. "We'll protect everyone, but this trial will not be derailed." A murmur of approval rose from the back. Then, the surprise no one expected. "Your Honor," a voice said. It was Matt Devlin. He stood at the witness bench. No longer summoned, no longer nervous. This time, he requested to testify voluntarily. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Matt cleared his throat, voice shaky at first. "I lied earlier. I did it because I was scared. Because powerful men told me to. Because they knew things about me. About my family. And they made it clear I'd lose everything if I told the truth." "What truth?" the prosecutor asked gently. Matt looked toward Tom, not with hatred. With heartbreak. "Everything Denzel said. It happened. I was there. I heard it all." Tom called Elena a threat. He laughed when they planned how to box her out, and I said nothing. Gasps echoed around the courtroom. Tom didn't react. His hands just gripped the armrests tighter. "They promised me roles, protection, loyalty, and I took it. I took their silence money. And it haunted me every single day since. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Devlin, do you have evidence to support your claim? No, Matt said. They made sure of that, but Denzel did. He stood slowly, reached into his coat, and handed the USB drive to the bailiff. This, he said, is everything they tried to burn last night. The prosecutor loaded the drive into the courtroom monitor. One by one, documents appeared, emails from executives mocking Elena's ambition, internal memos instructing studios to blacklist her, texts where handlers discussed media distractions to bury her complaints. It wasn't just one man's vendetta. It was an industry-wide operation. The room was silent, the kind of silence that comes only when truth is undeniable. Hendricks tried to object, but even the judge looked too shaken to allow the interruption. The prosecutor turned to the jury. This isn't just about Elena Ward. It's about every actor who's been silenced, every crew member pushed out, every voice drowned in fear. Tom Cruise was not just a participant, he was a conductor. As court adjourned for the day, the world exploded outside. Headlines screamed, Denzel delivers evidence that shakes Hollywood's foundations. Cruise's empire crumbles under undeniable proof. The silence is over. But inside his hotel room, Denzel wasn't celebrating. He was sitting alone, looking out the window, fingers resting on a copy of Elena Ward's statement, the original, handwritten one, never shared with the press. Her words repeated in his mind. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to matter. And finally she did. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because that night, an anonymous email arrived in the inbox of the court clerk. Subject line, you're missing one piece. Attached was a video. Date stamped, Studio Lounge. Same day as the now famous conversation. In the corner of the frame, a small camera hidden behind a vase. And in that video, Tom Cruise, laughing. But more than that, signing a paper, a contract. One that ordered the early termination of Elena's deals. With a signature, his. The courtroom plunged into darkness. First came the silence, sharp, immediate, like a vacuum sucking the oxygen out of the room. Then, the buzz of uneasy voices, phones lit up in hands. Cameras stopped rolling, microphones clicked off. Even the emergency lights, for a moment, failed to come on. In that suspended breath of blackness, someone whispered, he's still pulling strings. And for the first time in days, Denzel Washington felt something colder than fear, recognition. Because whoever whispered that wasn't wrong. Seconds later, backup generators hummed to life. Dim lights returned, casting ghostly glows across confused faces. The judge banged his gavel. Order. Remain calm. Security is investigating. But no one was calm, because the timing wasn't a coincidence. Just as the court was preparing to play the final piece of evidence, the video file showing Tom Cruise personally signing Elena Ward's contract, cancellation, the lights failed. And so did the projection system. Technical malfunction, one technician mumbled. But his voice shook too much to believe it. The judge called a temporary adjournment. Outside the courtroom, chaos brewed. News anchors spoke urgently into cameras. We're hearing reports of localized outages, all centered around the courthouse. Power grid. Others speculated about sabotage. Internet theorists exploded online with phrases like power play, cover-up, and celebrity corruption exposed. Denzel remained inside, not pacing, just waiting. He turned to the prosecutor. Do we have another copy? She nodded. 2. He handed her his phone. Send one to this email. Secure cloud, 2-factor authentication. You think someone's coming for the original? I think someone already did. An hour later, the court resumed. But this time, every backup was in place. Private generators, bodyguards stationed near the evidence, independent servers mirroring the files. They weren't just protecting testimony. Now they were protecting the truth itself. The judge addressed the room. We will now play the final video submitted to the court. Verified by forensic analysts, its authenticity has been confirmed. The screen came to life. The footage was grainy, captured by a forgotten surveillance camera behind a vase in a studio lounge. It wasn't meant to record secrets, but it had. The audio began. "Get her out of the picture," said Cruz's voice, calm, measured, almost casual. "She's great, Tom," replied a man off-screen. "So is Meg Ryan." Cruz chuckled. "Talent's not the problem. Obedience is." Then he signed a document. The camera zoomed in just enough to catch the heading, "Early Contract Termination Agreement." And then, in slow, unmistakable motion, his signature, Thomas C. Cruz. The courtroom gasped. This was no longer rumor, no longer testimony. It was evidence. Visual, signed, sealed. Hendricks, red-faced and sweating, leapt up. "Your Honor, this is entrapment. How was this footage obtained?" "It violates privacy laws," the judge glared. "This footage was discovered on studio property. It was not placed by law enforcement. It was not staged. And most importantly, it's the truth." Hendricks slumped into his chair. Tom Cruise stared straight ahead, unblinking. The mask of control cracked, just a little. And for the first time, the Titan of Hollywood looked cornered. Denzel turned to face the courtroom. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone," he said quietly. "But I also didn't come to let someone else's silence define my legacy." He looked directly at Cruz. "You could have changed this system. You had the power. You had the platform. Instead, you chose to protect the mirror, not the people behind it." The jury sat frozen, and just then, another twist. A woman stood up from the back, row. Young, trembling. She looked barely out of film school. "Your Honor," she called out. "I have something to say." The judge paused. "Identify yourself." "My name is Tara. I was Tom Cruise's intern during the Elena Ward project." "Approach the bench," the judge said. She handed a folder to the bailiff. Inside, emails from Cruise's personal assistant. Instructions on how to reroute casting calls. How to ensure Elena's name never made it past the gatekeepers. How to flood press outlets with counter-narratives. It was a roadmap for reputational erasure. "I couldn't sleep anymore," Tara whispered. "I was part of it. I followed orders and it was wrong." The judge added the documents to the case. The courtroom was now a pressure cooker. Press, jury, spectators, all simmering in disbelief. And just when it felt like everything had been said, when all cards were on the table, Denzel took out one final letter. Handwritten, dated last year. It was from Elena Ward. "I tried everything," it read. "But the truth has too many locks and too few keys. If you're reading this, Denzel, then you're the only one left who still believes the locks can be broken. I'm counting on you." He handed the letter to the judge. "This isn't just about a person," he said. "It's about a pattern." Outside, protesters filled the street, but they weren't screaming anymore. They were holding candles, silent, respectful, awake. And across Hollywood, something unexpected began happening. Young actors speaking out, directors posting apologies, producers quitting high-profile projects because a door had been forced open, and light, real, hard, honest light, had poured in. Cliffhanger for Part 5. The judge cleared his throat and said, "We will reconvene tomorrow for the final phase, closing arguments." But as the gavel fell, Tom Cruise whispered something to his lawyer, and Hendricks turned pale, because what Cruise said was, "I'm taking the stand." The next morning, the air outside the courthouse didn't feel like morning at all. It felt like the closing moments of a long storm, heavy, electrified, quiet before the collapse. Every major news network broadcasted live. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Cruise collapse, hashtag Denzel truth, hashtag Hollywood reckoning. Inside courtroom 6B. It was standing room only. This wasn't just the final day of a trial. This was the end of an era. And as the judge took his seat, the energy in the room shifted. Sharply, because the one man no one ever expected to testify had shown up early. Tom Cruise. He walked with perfect posture, flanked by silence, wearing the same suit he wore on his very first film premiere. Not because of nostalgia, but because he knew the cameras would eat it alive. He took the stand. His lawyer, Max Hendricks, looked like he hadn't slept. His hands trembled slightly as he arranged papers, but none of that mattered now, because Cruise had made the call. He was going to speak for himself. He was sworn in. Mr. Cruise, the prosecutor began. You have been given every opportunity to deny these allegations, to stay quiet. Yet today, you choose to testify. Why? Tom's eyes moved across the room, stopping briefly on Denzel. Then on the jury, because silence didn't save me, he said quietly. It only delayed the truth. A gasp rippled through the court. I've spent my entire life building a brand, he continued. And I told myself it was for the audience, the fans, the mission. But really, it was about control. He paused, swallowed hard. Elena Ward didn't deserve what happened to her. She was talented, smart, fearless, and that made her dangerous to men like me, who relied on silence to maintain power. Every camera light blinked in unison, capturing what was once unthinkable, Hollywood's biggest name. Confessing. Did you sign the contract termination order? The prosecutor asked. He nodded. Yes. Did you laugh while it happened? Yes. Why? Because I'd been taught, in this business, vulnerability is weakness. And if you don't control the story controls you. Outside the courthouse, a hush spread across the protest lines. Back in the courtroom, the prosecutor stepped aside. The judge looked visibly stunned. Even the jury sat in disbelief, pens frozen mid-sentence. Then Denzel stood up. The judge motioned. You may speak. Denzel walked toward the witness stand, but not with anger. Not with judgment. Just presence. Thank you, he said. Softly. Cruise blinked. For what? For finally doing the thing no one else could. Not your lawyers, not the studios, not your publicists. Only you, which is, tell the truth. They looked at each other for a long moment. Two titans, one broken. One standing because he bent. Then Denzel addressed the court. This case was never about punishment. It was about pattern. About legacy. About changing what gets protected and what gets buried. He turned to the jury. You're not deciding whether Tom Cruise is a monster. You're deciding whether we let fame erase accountability. You're deciding if we keep living in a story written by fear. When he sat down, the room stayed silent for a full minute. Then the judge gave final instructions to the jury, closing. Arguments were waived. Both sides had said everything they needed to say, and more. The jury left. And in their absence, the world waited. 6 hours later, they returned. The foreperson stood. Voice steady. On the count of coordinated career sabotage and abuse of power, we find the defendant, Thomas Cruise, guilty. No screams, no applause. Just a wave of breath leaving 1,000 lungs at once. The judge banged his gavel. Sentence. Public apology. Studio fines. 10-year ban from serving in any leadership role across major film guilds. And a mandatory industry reform commission co-led by Denzel Washington and 2 whistleblowers, including Elena Ward. The punishment wasn't prison. It was exposure and a promise. No more hiding behind cameras. Outside, the crowd didn't cheer. They wept, not because someone had fallen, but because someone had finally stood. A few days later, Tom Cruise disappeared from public view. No interviews. No rebuttals, just quiet. Rumors said he'd moved overseas. Some claimed he was writing a memoir. But Denzel never cared for the gossip that he was busy building something new. He launched the Truth Screen Initiative, a platform for actors, writers and crew to report abuse, discrimination, and industry manipulation without fear. Its tagline was simple: truth deserves the spotlight. Elena Ward re-emerged, stronger, cast in a major film backed by Denzel's production company. Not because he pitied her, but because she earned it. 1 year later, they stood side by side at the Oscars, not on stage, in the audience, watching. A different kind of film win Best Picture, one made without fear, without silence. Without masks. And in that quiet applause, something beautiful happened. A new Hollywood began.